The review panel will be grappling with pretty complex systemic issues of progressive realization, which are more than just individual housing rights violations. So do you have any advice to give them based on international law on how to deal with these bigger systemic pieces?
Right. The basic question I think that the review panel or any body dealing with these kinds of decisions has to ask is, what are we best at? What's the government best at? And what needs input from stakeholders and civil society? And it's not always easy to answer that question, and there's a role for each. But the main thing is to make sure that we don't talk ourselves into thinking that the whole thing should be left up to government, because that would be to abdicate the very responsibility of the review panel to review what the government is doing through a human rights lens. So that has to happen. But once that's been done, it may be that when it comes to the remedy, a lot of it may be handed back to the government to say, well, we can't design the specifics of this program, but it's clear to us that what you've done so far isn't good enough, and you need to come up with something better, and you need to report in 3 months on what that is, and it has to be reviewed by experts or whatever, so you set up a process. But some of it has to be sent back to government. And I guess the only thing I should add in this is that the idea of the review panel process in the NHSA is a bit different, because it does envisage a more constructive relationship with government. And so in crafting effective remedies, it may be possible for the review panel to engage in advance with the government, saying, well, what would it take for you to actually do this? What would you need in terms of guidelines, parameters, reporting mechanisms? Making sure that we come up with recommendations that the government isn't going to say, well, we can't do that, and then just ignore it. So get some of the government concerns, hear them in advance about what the obstacles are, so that those can be addressed in the recommendations, rather than putting out recommendations that the government is just going to ignore because somehow they feel that their concerns weren't even considered. So that whole dialogic process at all stages is important. In designing the remedy and in implementing it, it's always going to be better to make sure that people are talking to each other.
That's great. Thank you so much, Bruce. I feel like the review panel will be well primed now to go out and make some amazing recommendations.